The doorbell rang at 6:30 in the morning, which was my first clue that my Tuesday was about to go sideways. And when I opened it to find Deborah standing there with her arms crossed and her mouth pinched tighter than a bank vault, I knew I was right. "Do you have any idea what time you were making all that racket this morning?" she demanded, not even bothering with a greeting. I blinked sleep out of my eyes and tried to remember what day it was. We had gotten 8 inches of snow overnight, and I had been up at 5 to clear my driveway before heading to work. "I was shoveling snow," I said, keeping my voice level. "It is winter in Minnesota, after all." Deborah's face flushed red, which clashed terribly with her bottle blonde hair. She was the president of the Maple Ridge HOA, and she took her position more seriously than most people take national security. The noise ordinance clearly states no loud activities before 7 in the morning on weekdays. That includes snow removal equipment. "I was using a shovel," I repeated slowly. "A manual shovel. How loud could that possibly be?" "The scraping noise woke me up," she insisted. "And then you were using that awful snow blower." "For about 5 minutes, yes, to clear the end of the driveway where the plow pushed all that heavy stuff. I have to get to work by 7:30. She pulled out her phone and started tapping on the screen with her long acrylic nails. "I am documenting this violation, Bryan Hoffman. This is your second noise complaint this month." The first one had been for playing music at what I considered a reasonable volume on a Saturday afternoon. Apparently reasonable to me meant eardrum splitting to Deborah. "You do what you need to do," I said, starting to close the door. I did not have time for this. "Wait," she called out. "The fine will be $250, and if you receive one more violation this quarter, it goes up to $500. I stopped. "You are fining me for clearing snow from my own driveway." "I am fining you for violating the noise ordinance," she corrected, as if that made it better. "The HOA board will be sending you official notice within 3 business days. Have a nice day, Bryan." She turned on her heel and marched back down my walkway, which I had carefully cleared and salted, probably making notes on her phone about other violations she could dream up. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, feeling the cold air seep into my house, and tried to decide if I was more angry or just tired. I settled on both. This was what I got for buying a house in a neighborhood with an HOA. My real estate agent had assured me it was a friendly one, that they just wanted to keep property values up. What she had failed to mention was that Deborah had been elected president 6 months before I moved in, and she ran the association like her own personal fiefdom. I got ready for work in a fog of irritation, barely tasting my coffee. By the time I got to my job as a software engineer at a logistics company in downtown Minneapolis, I had worked myself into a proper mood. My coworker and friend, Marcus, took one look at my face and whistled. "What happened to you?" he asked. I told him about my morning visit from Deborah. He shook his head in sympathy. Marcus lived in a regular neighborhood where people could shovel snow whenever they damn well pleased. $250 for shoveling your driveway, he said, incredulous. "That is insane, man." "Tell me about it," I muttered, pulling up my code editor. "And the worst part is I have to do it again. We are supposed to get another 6 inches tonight." "So what are you going to do?" "I have no idea. Wait until 7 in the morning and hope I do not get stuck in my driveway, I guess." Marcus leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "You know, my cousin is starting this new business. It is kind of weird, but it might be perfect for your situation." I looked up from my screen. "What kind of business?" "Silent snow removal," Marcus said. "He specializes in noise-sensitive situations, uses all these special tools and techniques to clear snow without making a sound." I laughed, thinking he was joking. "Come on, seriously." "I am serious," Marcus insisted. His name is David Chen. He used to work in some kind of specialized military unit, all that stealth training stuff. When he got out, he was trying to figure out what to do with those skills in civilian life, and he noticed there was this whole untapped market for people who needed work done quietly. He started with lawn care, using these old-fashioned push mowers with rubber wheels, hand tools, all kinds of stuff. Now he is expanding into winter services. That sounds completely made up, I said, but I was intrigued despite myself. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a website. Silent Solutions Services, I read aloud, when discretion matters. The site showed photos of a crew dressed head to toe in black, using various tools to trim hedges, rake leaves, and yes, clear snow. They looked like they were about to rappel into an enemy compound, not do yard work. "This is real?" I asked. "Completely real," Marcus confirmed. David is dead serious about it. He even makes his crew go through training on how to move quietly, how to use tools without making noise, all that stuff. They wear special rubber-soled boots, use plastic shovels, everything. I looked at the website more carefully. The testimonials were glowing. Apparently David and his crew had worked for people with sleeping babies, night shift workers, and even one guy who claimed to have misophonia and could not stand the sound of scraping. The prices were higher than regular snow removal, but not outrageous. I am going to call him, I decided. Marcus grinned. "I was hoping you would say that. Tell him I sent you. He gives referral discounts." I stepped outside to make the call, partly for privacy and partly because I needed to pace. A man answered on the second ring. "Silent Solutions Services, this is David Chen." "Hi, my name is Bryan Hoffman. Marcus Williams gave me your number. I have a kind of unusual situation." "Marcus is my cousin, great guy," David said warmly. "And unusual is our specialty. Tell me what is going on." I explained about the HOA, about Deborah, about the fine and the threat of more fines. David listened without interrupting, and I could hear him typing in the background. "So you need snow removal that will not trigger a noise complaint," he summarized when I finished. "That is definitely something we can handle. How big is your driveway?" "2-car wide, about 50 feet long. And there is a walkway from the driveway to the front door and one around to the back deck." "Okay," David said. "Standard residential job. We could do that for $150 per visit, or we can set up a seasonal contract where we come automatically whenever there is more than 3 inches of accumulation. That would be $500 for the rest of the winter season." I did some quick math in my head. We typically got snow that needed clearing about once a week during the heavy months, sometimes more. 500 was less than 2 of Deborah's fines. "Let me do the seasonal contract," I said. "When can you start?" "We are scheduled to be in your area tomorrow morning, weather permitting." "Looks like that storm is still coming in tonight. We typically work between midnight and 6 in the morning for our clients who have noise restrictions. Would that work for you?" "That would be perfect," I said. "You will really be completely silent." "Silent enough that your neighbors will not hear us, which is what matters," David clarified. "We are not supernaturally quiet, but we use techniques and tools that minimize noise to levels that will not carry into houses, especially when people are sleeping. We have never had a noise complaint, and we have been doing this for 3 years. "That is exactly what I need," I said, feeling better than I had all day. "Sign me up." David took my information, my address in Maple Ridge, and my credit card details. "We will send someone to survey the property tonight before we start work, just to familiarize ourselves with the layout. You will not even know they were there. Then our full crew will handle the snow removal. You will wake up tomorrow to a clear driveway." "This feels too good to be true," I admitted. David chuckled. I get that a lot. But we deliver, I promise. We take our work seriously. Every member of my team is trained to our exact standards. We will take care of you, Bryan. After we hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I went back inside and got back to work, actually able to focus for the first time all day. Marcus caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. The snow started falling around 4 in the afternoon, big fat flakes that accumulated fast. By the time I drove home at 5:30, there was already a solid 3 inches on the ground, and the weather forecast predicted it would continue until midnight. My driveway was going to be a mess by morning. But for the first time since moving into this neighborhood, I did not feel stressed about it. I made myself dinner, watched some television, and went to bed at my normal time around 10:30. The snow was still coming down hard, and I had a moment of doubt. What if this Silent Solutions thing was a scam? What if David was just taking my money and no one would show up? I pushed the thoughts aside and went to sleep. My alarm went off at 6:30 the next morning, same as always. I stumbled out of bed, went to the bathroom, and then headed downstairs to make coffee. It was still dark outside, but the street lights illuminated my front yard enough for me to see through the living room window. My driveway was completely clear. Not just scraped down to the pavement, but cleared with precision. The snow was neatly piled on either side, the edges perfectly straight. My walkway was the same, cleared, and I could see the faint evidence of salt scattered on the surface. Even the area around my mailbox at the end of the driveway had been cleared out. I opened my front door and stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug in hand. The cold air bit at my face, but I barely noticed. The work was immaculate. I looked at my neighbors' driveways. Most were still buried under snow, though a few early risers were already out with their shovels and blowers. The morning was filling with the usual symphony of scraping and engines, but my driveway was already done. I pulled out my phone and found an email from Silent Solutions Services, time-stamped at 5:45 in the morning. Service completed at your property. Invoice attached. Thank you for choosing Silent Solutions. I had slept through the entire thing. I had not heard a sound. I was standing there admiring the work when I heard Deborah's voice from across the street. Bryan Hoffman. Oh no. I turned to see her marching across the street in her bathrobe and boots, her face already turning that familiar shade of red. When did you have your snow cleared? She demanded. I do not know, I said honestly. Sometime this morning, I guess. I did not hear anything, she said suspiciously. Did you hire someone? Yes, I said. I hired a professional service. Is that a problem? Her eyes narrowed. Which service? I do not think that is any of your business, Deborah. If they violated the noise ordinance, it is absolutely my business, she snapped. What company? They did not violate anything, I said calmly. You just said you did not hear anything. That is not the point. I want to know who you hired. And I want to drink my coffee in peace, I replied. Have a good day, Deborah. I went back inside before she could argue further, watching through the window as she stood in my front yard for a moment, clearly frustrated, before stomping back to her own house. I could not help but smile. This was going to be interesting. The next snowfall came 4 days later, on a Sunday night. I went to bed knowing that Silent Solutions would handle it, and sure enough, Monday morning my driveway was clear again. This time I tried to stay up to watch them work, positioning myself by the upstairs window with a clear view of the driveway. Around 2 in the morning, I saw movement. 3 figures dressed entirely in black moved into my driveway, barely visible even with the street lights. They moved with an economy of motion that was almost mesmerizing to watch. One person started at the garage door, using what looked like a wide plastic shovel to push the snow to the side. The motion was smooth and controlled, no jerky movements, no scraping sounds that I could hear from inside the house. The other two worked on the walkways, using similar shovels. They communicated with hand signals, pointing and gesturing to coordinate their efforts. When they needed to move the snow further, they used flat plastic scoops to carry it to the designated piles, walking carefully to avoid making noise with their footsteps. The precision was impressive. They worked in a pattern, clearing section by section, never getting in each other's way. When they finished with the shoveling, one of them pulled out a hand spreader and walked the entire area, distributing salt or ice melt evenly. The whole operation took maybe 20 minutes, and then they were gone, disappearing into the night as quietly as they had come. I checked the time. 2:37 in the morning. No wonder I had slept through it the first time. I went back to bed feeling deeply satisfied. This was worth every penny. By the third snowfall, word had apparently gotten around the neighborhood. I started getting texts from neighbors asking for the name of my snow removal service. I gave out the information freely. If more people in the neighborhood started using silent solutions, Deborah would have even less ammunition for her noise complaints. Marcus told me that David was thrilled with the referrals. Apparently, 5 other houses in Maple Ridge had signed up for seasonal contracts, and David was considering expanding his crew to handle the increased demand. Everything was going smoothly until the morning I woke up to find a certified letter taped to my front door. It was from the Maple Ridge HOA board, signed by Deborah and 2 other board members, Karen Winters and Patricia Morrison. "Dear Mr. Hoffman," it began. "It has come to our attention that you are employing a snow removal service that operates during prohibited hours. While we have no direct evidence of noise violations, the board has determined that any snow removal activity conducted between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. is a violation of community standards, regardless of noise level. This is effective immediately. Future violations will result in fines starting at $500. Sincerely, the Maple Ridge HOA Board." I read the letter 3 times, feeling my blood pressure rise with each pass. This was ridiculous. They were literally changing the rules because they could not catch me making noise. I pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws, which I had started reading carefully after the first complaint. There was nothing in there about prohibiting quiet activities during certain hours. The only relevant rule was the noise ordinance. I called David immediately. "They cannot do that," he said after I read him the letter. "HOA rules have to be clearly stated in the bylaws. They cannot just make up new rules without following the proper amendment process, which typically requires a vote from all homeowners." "So what do I do?" I asked. "First, I would respond in writing that you dispute this rule as it does not appear in the current bylaws. Second, I would show up to the next HOA meeting and challenge this publicly. And third, you might want to talk to a lawyer who specializes in HOA disputes. This kind of selective enforcement and rule-making is exactly the kind of thing they deal with." I thanked him and hung up, then spent my lunch break researching HOA lawyers in the Minneapolis area. I found one named Sarah Martinez, who had excellent reviews and specialized in what her website called HOA overreach cases. I called and made an appointment for later that week. In the meantime, I drafted a response letter to the HOA board. I kept it professional but firm, stating that I disputed the new rule as it did not appear in the current bylaws, and requesting documentation of when and how this rule had been properly adopted. I sent it certified mail, return receipt requested. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. I had never attended one before, having better things to do with my time, but I marked it on my calendar and prepared myself for battle. Sarah Martinez turned out to be a sharp woman in her 40s with an impressive track record of making HOAs back down from overreaching policies. She reviewed my documents, read through the HOA bylaws, and listened to my story with increasing interest. "This is a pretty clear-cut case," she said. "They are trying to target you specifically because you found a way to comply with their existing rules in a way they do not like. The courts do not look favorably on that kind of selective enforcement, and creating new rules without following the proper procedure is a violation of Minnesota HOA law." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now you go to that meeting and you put them on notice that they are not following the law. Bring copies of the bylaws, bring my card, and record the meeting if possible. Minnesota is a one-party consent state, so you do not need their permission. If they continue to push this, we can file a complaint and probably get an injunction preventing them from enforcing this fake rule." "How much is this going to cost me?" I asked, dreading the answer. "My retainer is $1,500, but honestly, I do not think this will go much further than a strongly worded letter from my office. These small HOA boards fold pretty quickly when they realize they are actually going to face legal consequences. They are used to homeowners just paying the fines because it is easier." I signed the retainer agreement and left feeling armed for the coming confrontation. Tuesday evening arrived cold and clear. I bundled up and walked the 3 blocks to the clubhouse, arriving a few minutes before 7. About 15 other residents were already there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows facing a long table where Deborah and the other 2 board members sat. Deborah looked up when I walked in, and her expression hardened. "Good evening, Bryan," she said coolly. "So nice of you to finally join us for a meeting." "Good evening, Deborah," I replied, taking a seat in the back row. I pulled out my phone and started recording, keeping it in my jacket pocket with just the microphone exposed. The meeting started with the usual boring HOA business. Budget reports, discussion of upcoming maintenance projects, a complaint about someone's trash cans being visible from the street. I half listened, waiting for my moment. It came about 30 minutes in when Deborah brought up new business. "As you all know," she began, "we have had ongoing issues with noise complaints in the neighborhood. The board has been working hard to address these concerns and maintain the peaceful environment that makes Maple Ridge such a desirable community." Several heads nodded in agreement. "To that end," Deborah continued, "we have implemented a new policy regarding snow removal. All snow removal activities, regardless of noise level, must be conducted between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. This will prevent any potential disturbances during sleeping hours." A hand went up in the front row. "What if we need to leave early for work?" a man asked. "I have to be on the road by 6:30. "Then you will need to clear your driveway the night before," Deborah said. "We all have to make small sacrifices for the good of the community." "That seems unreasonable," another voice called out. "What if it snows overnight?" "Then you leave earlier and drive carefully," Deborah said, her tone suggesting the matter was closed. I raised my hand. Deborah's eyes found me and I saw her jaw tighten. "Yes, Bryan," I stood up. "I have a question about this new policy. Can you point me to where it appears in our bylaws? I have read them thoroughly, and I do not see any provision that allows the board to restrict quiet activities to certain hours." "The board has the authority to create rules that maintain community standards," Deborah said. "That is clearly stated in Section 7 of the bylaws." Section 7 allows the board to enforce the bylaws and create procedures for enforcement, I countered. It does not give the board the authority to create new restrictions that contradict the existing bylaws. The only time restriction in our bylaws relates to noise, not to activities themselves. Murmurs rippled through the small crowd. I saw a few people nodding. "This is not up for debate," Deborah said sharply. "The board has made its decision." Actually, according to Minnesota Statute 302.115, HOA boards must follow the procedures outlined in their governing documents when creating new rules, I said, reading from notes I had prepared. Those procedures typically require notice to homeowners and an opportunity to vote. Was that process followed here? Deborah's face was getting red again. Karen leaned over and whispered something to her. "We do not need to justify our decisions to you," Deborah said. "The rule is in effect." "Then I am formally notifying you that I will not be complying with this rule, as it is not legally enforceable," I said calmly. "I have consulted with an attorney who specializes in HOA law, and she has advised me that this rule violates both our bylaws and state statute. If the board attempts to fine me or take any action against me based on this rule, I will file a complaint with the court." I pulled out Sarah's business card and held it up. "My attorney is prepared to represent me and any other homeowners who are being subjected to this kind of overreach. She has successfully handled dozens of similar cases." The room was completely silent now. Everyone was looking back and forth between Deborah and me like they were watching a tennis match. "Are you threatening this board?" Deborah asked, her voice shaking slightly. "I am informing the board that I know my rights as a homeowner," I replied. "And I am suggesting that before the board takes any further action on this matter, you might want to consult with the HOA's attorney to confirm whether this rule is legally sound." Patricia, the third board member who had been silent until now, cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should table this discussion until we can get legal guidance," she suggested quietly. "We do not need legal guidance," Deborah insisted. "We have the authority to do this." "Deborah, I think Patricia is right," Karen said. "Maybe we should be careful here." I could see Deborah was outnumbered. She glared at me for a long moment, then gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. "Fine," she said. "We will table the snow removal policy pending legal review." "Is there any other new business?" The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. I stayed until the end, making sure to be visible and available if anyone wanted to talk to me. Several residents approached me afterward, thanking me for speaking up. One woman, an elderly lady named Grace who lived 2 houses down from me, squeezed my arm. "That woman has been a tyrant since she got elected," Grace said. "Someone needed to stand up to her. Thank you." I walked home feeling vindicated but also a little nervous. I had made an enemy of Deborah, and I had a feeling this was not over. The next day, I received an email from the HOA's attorney, a man named Robert Fletcher. It was professional and concise. He confirmed that the snow removal policy, as described, would need to be properly adopted through the amendment process outlined in the bylaws, which included written notice to all homeowners 30 days in advance and a majority vote. He recommended that the board rescind the policy immediately to avoid potential legal action. I forwarded the email to Sarah, who responded with a simple thumbs-up emoji. 2 days later, I received another letter from the HOA, this time signed only by Patricia, announcing that the proposed snow removal time restriction had been withdrawn. The letter included a passive-aggressive note about how the board was disappointed that some residents chose to resort to legal threats rather than working collaboratively with the board. But I did not care. I had won. The snow kept falling, and Silent Solutions kept clearing my driveway. David told me that 8 houses in Maple Ridge were now using their services, and the word of mouth was spreading to other neighborhoods. He was hiring more crew members and expanding into other silent services like leaf removal and lawn care for the coming spring. Everything seemed perfect until the morning I woke up to find police cars on my street. I looked out the window and saw 2 squad cars parked in front of Deborah's house. Officers were walking around her yard, examining something. My stomach dropped. What had happened? I threw on clothes and went outside, joining the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk at a respectful distance. Grace was there, wrapped in a thick coat. "What is going on?" I asked her. "Someone vandalized Deborah's yard last night," Grace said quietly. "Tore up her flower beds, spray-painted her fence, broke her mailbox. It is a real mess." I felt sick. "That is awful." "The police think it happened around 2 or 3 in the morning," Grace continued. "Nobody heard anything, of course. 2 or 3 in the morning. The same time that Silent Solutions typically worked." My mind was racing. Surely they had not done this. David ran a legitimate business. His crew would not vandalize someone's property, but the timing was suspicious, and Deborah would definitely make the connection. As if summoned by my thoughts, Deborah emerged from her house and pointed directly at me. "There he is," she shouted. "Officer, that is the man I told you about," one of the police officers, a tired-looking man in his 40s, walked over to me. "Sir, can I have a word with you?" "Of course," I said, my heart pounding. We walked a little way down the street away from the crowd. "I am Officer Martinez," he said. "Can you tell me your name?" "Bryan Hoffman. I live right there." I pointed to my house. "Mrs. Peterson says you two have been having some disputes," Officer Martinez said. "We have had some disagreements about HOA matters," I admitted. "But I would never vandalize her property. That is insane. Can you tell me where you were between 2 and 4 a.m. last night?" "I was asleep in my bed," I said. "I live alone, so I do not have anyone who can verify that, but I was definitely home." Officer Martinez nodded, making notes. "Mrs. Peterson mentioned that you hire a service that works during those hours, a snow removal service." "Yes, Silent Solutions services," I said. "But they would never do something like this. They are professionals." "I am going to need their contact information," the officer said. I provided David's number and business information, feeling worse by the minute. This was a nightmare. "Am I a suspect?" I asked. "Right now we are just gathering information," Officer Martinez said. "But I would advise you not to leave town, and if you think of anything that might be helpful, please give me a call." He handed me his card. I went back to my house feeling shaken. I called David immediately. "I already heard," he said before I could say anything. "The police called me about 20 minutes ago. Bryan, I need you to know that my crew had nothing to do with this. We were not even in your neighborhood last night. There was no snow, so we had no reason to be there." "Can you prove that?" I asked. "Absolutely," David said firmly. "We keep detailed logs of where our crews are every night, GPS tracking on all our vehicles, time-stamped photos of completed jobs, everything. Last night my team was working in Eden Prairie, about 15 miles from Maple Ridge. We have documentation for every minute of their shift." I felt relief wash over me. "Thank you, I was worried." "I know," David said, "and I understand why. The timing looks suspicious. But whoever did this, it was not us. I am cooperating fully with the police investigation. I already sent them our logs and documentation." We hung up, and I spent the rest of the day in a state of anxiety, jumping every time my phone rang, half expecting it to be the police telling me I was being arrested. But the call that came that evening was from Officer Martinez with different news. "Mr. Hoffman, "I wanted to update you on the investigation," he said. "We have reviewed the documentation from Silent Solutions Services, and they have been cleared of any involvement. Their GPS data and other records confirm they were nowhere near your neighborhood at the time of the vandalism." "That is good to hear," I said. "We also reviewed some security camera footage from other houses on the street," Officer Martinez continued. "We have identified a suspect, and it is not you or anyone associated with your snow removal service. I wanted to let you know so you can stop worrying." "Who did it?" I asked, unable to help myself. "I cannot share details of an ongoing investigation," he said. "But I can tell you that you are not a suspect and neither is your service provider. Have a good evening." I slept better that night, but I was intensely curious about who had vandalized Deborah's property. The answer came 2 days later when Grace knocked on my door with gossip that she was clearly dying to share. "You will never believe this," she said, barely containing her excitement. "They arrested Karen Winters for vandalizing Deborah's yard." "Karen? From the HOA board?" I asked, shocked. "The very same," Grace confirmed. "Apparently she and Deborah have been having their own feud about money. Karen thought Deborah was spending too much of the HOA budget on things that benefited her personally, like that fancy new mailbox she installed last month. She claimed it was for the community entrance, but it is just in front of her house. They have been fighting about it in private for weeks." "So Karen vandalized her property in revenge?" I asked, trying to wrap my head around this. "That is what the police think," Grace said. "They found spray paint cans in Karen's garage that matched the paint used on Deborah's fence, and her phone's GPS put her in the area at the time. She thought working at 2 in the morning would mean no one would see her, but she did not think about security cameras." "This is wild," I said. "It gets better," Grace continued. "Karen is claiming she only did it because Deborah has been embezzling from the HOA. She says she can prove that Deborah has been paying herself unauthorized bonuses and using HOA funds for personal expenses." My jaw dropped. "Is that true?" "I have no idea, but the police are apparently looking into it now. The whole board is under investigation. Patricia resigned this morning." The next few weeks were chaotic for the Maple Ridge HOA. Karen was charged with vandalism and criminal mischief. In response, she filed a formal complaint with the state alleging financial misconduct by Deborah. An audit of the HOA finances was ordered. I stayed out of it as much as possible, but it was impossible not to hear the gossip. The audit revealed that Deborah had indeed been paying herself an unauthorized salary of $1,000 a month for the past 2 years and had charged numerous personal expenses to the HOA credit card. Everything from groceries to a weekend trip to Duluth that she claimed was for research into best practices for community associations. Deborah was forced to resign from the board in disgrace. Criminal charges were filed against her for theft and fraud. Karen took a plea deal for the vandalism and got probation and community service. Patricia, who apparently had no knowledge of any of the financial irregularities, came back to the board and helped organize a special election for new leadership. The new HOA president turned out to be a mild-mannered accountant named Tom who lived on the other side of the neighborhood. His first official act was to eliminate the noise ordinance time restrictions entirely, replacing them with a simple rule about keeping noise to reasonable levels and being considerate of neighbors. His second act was to reduce the fine schedule to more reasonable amounts. I attended the first meeting under the new leadership and found it to be refreshingly boring. They discussed actual community needs like road maintenance and snow plowing for common areas. No one yelled. No one threatened legal action. It was glorious. Silent Solutions continued to clear my driveway all winter without incident. David's business was thriving. He told me that the chaos with the HOA had actually been good for publicity, in a weird way. Several news outlets had picked up the story of the Silent Ninja snow removal service that got caught up in an HOA fraud investigation. The phrase, Silent Ninja, had come from a local news anchor who thought it sounded more interesting than specialized quiet service provider. David had leaned into it, updating his marketing to embrace the ninja theme. His crew started wearing all-black uniforms with a logo featuring a figure holding a shovel in a martial arts pose. It was silly, but it worked. He was getting calls from all over the Twin Cities metro area. As winter began to wind down and the frequency of snowfalls decreased, I realized I had not thought about Deborah or HOA drama in weeks. The stress that had been hanging over me since I moved into this neighborhood had finally lifted. One evening in early March, when the last dirty piles of snow were melting in the sunshine and the first hints of spring were in the air, David stopped by my house. It was the first time I had met him in person. He was a compact man in his 30s with an easy smile and a firm handshake. "I wanted to thank you personally," he said. "Your situation with the HOA ended up being the best thing that could have happened for my business. I have hired 10 new people and expanded into 4 new service areas. I am even looking at franchising the concept." "I am glad something good came out of that mess," I said. "Your service saved me a lot of stress and money. I should be thanking you." "We helped each other out," David said. "That is how it is supposed to work. Actually, I wanted to offer you something: free lawn care for the summer season. Same silent treatment, early morning mowing and trimming so you never have to think about it." "You do not have to do that," I protested. "I want to," David insisted. "You were my first contract client in a residential neighborhood, and you stuck with me even when things got weird. Plus, Marcus is my cousin, and he would kill me if I did not take care of you." I laughed and accepted his offer. We talked for a while about his plans for the business, about the trial preparations for Deborah's fraud case, about life in general. It was nice to talk to someone who understood what I had been through. After David left, I sat on my porch with a beer and looked out at my neighborhood. Spring was coming. The trees were starting to bud. Kids were riding bikes again now that the streets were clear. Life was returning to normal. I thought about the chain of events that had started with a simple knock on my door, early one Tuesday morning. Deborah's complaint about noise had led me to Silent Solutions, which had led to the showdown at the HOA meeting, which had somehow led to the unraveling of a fraud scheme and the arrest of 2 board members. If someone had told me that story, I would not have believed it. But it had happened, and I had come through it okay, better than okay, actually. I had stood up for myself. I had learned my rights as a homeowner. I had made friends with my neighbors and helped create positive change in the community. And I never had to shovel my driveway again at 5 in the morning. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Heard David stopped by. You guys are like best friends now, right?" I texted back. "Pretty much. Thanks for the referral, seriously. Anytime, man. Want to grab dinner this weekend?" "I want to hear all the latest HOA gossip." "There is not much left to gossip about," I typed. "Everything is actually boring and functional now." "Boring and functional sounds perfect," Marcus replied. "See you Saturday." I put my phone away and finished my beer, enjoying the peace and quiet. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear someone starting up a lawn mower. The sound did not bother me at all. The trial for Deborah's case was scheduled for late April. I was not directly involved, but several of my neighbors were called as witnesses, and Grace kept me updated on all the proceedings. The evidence against Deborah was overwhelming. She had taken more than $24,000 from the HOA over 2 years, and her defense that she deserved compensation for her work as president did not hold up, since the bylaws clearly stated that board positions were volunteer roles. She was convicted on multiple counts of theft and fraud. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison, followed by probation, and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA plus penalties. Her husband, who apparently had no knowledge of what she had been doing, filed for divorce while she was awaiting sentencing. I felt bad for him, and for their teenage kids, who had to deal with the shame and disruption of having their mother sent to prison. But I did not feel bad for Deborah herself. She had abused her position of power, stolen money from her neighbors, and made life miserable for people like me who just wanted to live peacefully in their homes. She had earned her consequences. Karen's vandalism case was much more straightforward. She completed her community service, paid her fine, and kept her head down. I saw her at the grocery store once, and we made eye contact for an awkward moment before she quickly looked away and hurried down another aisle. I did not blame her for not wanting to chat. The spring and summer passed pleasantly. True to his word, David's crew maintained my lawn with the same silent efficiency they had shown with snow removal. I would go to bed with slightly overgrown grass and wake up to find it perfectly trimmed, the edges neat, not a blade out of place. My neighbors continued to ask me about the service, and I continued to refer them. By midsummer, more than 20 houses in Maple Ridge were using Silent Solutions for various services. The company had become a fixture in the neighborhood, and David was making plans to expand into other suburbs. He even reached out to me to ask if I would be willing to do a video testimonial for his website. I agreed, and we filmed it in my front yard one Saturday morning. Before I found Silent Solutions, I was getting fined by my HOA for clearing snow too early in the morning, I said to the camera, feeling only slightly awkward. Now I never have to worry about it. My property is maintained perfectly, and I have never had another complaint. David and his team are professionals who take their work seriously. I cannot recommend them enough. The video went up on the website and apparently was quite effective. David told me it was his most viewed testimonial, probably because of the HOA angle. People loved stories about standing up to unreasonable HOA boards. In August, Tom, the new HOA president, called a special meeting to discuss the restitution money that Deborah was paying back. There was a debate about what to do with it. Some people wanted to use it for deferred maintenance projects. Others wanted to reduce dues for a few months to give everyone a break. Eventually, they decided to split it, using half for a much-needed repaving of the community center parking lot and distributing the other half as a credit against next year's dues. I voted for that compromise, and it passed easily. The whole meeting lasted less than an hour and involved zero drama. It was amazing how much better the HOA functioned with honest, reasonable people in charge. As fall approached, and the first hints of cold weather returned to Minnesota, I found myself actually looking forward to winter. Not because I loved snow, but because I knew I would not have to stress about clearing it. My seasonal contract with Silent Solutions automatically renewed in October, and I got an email from David confirming that they were ready for another winter season. The first significant snow came in mid-November, a quick 5-inch dump overnight. I woke up, looked out the window, and smiled at my clear driveway. Everything was exactly as it should be. That morning, I was getting ready for work when I heard a knock at the door. For a moment, I felt a flash of anxiety, remembering Deborah's early morning visits. But when I opened the door, it was Tom from the HOA. "Hey, Bryan, sorry to bother you," he said. I just wanted to let you know that we have had a few complaints about snow removal services working in the neighborhood during early morning hours." My heart sank. "Are you serious? I thought we were past all this." "Hang on, let me finish," Tom said, holding up his hand. "The complaints are not about noise. People are saying they wake up and their driveways are already clear, and they do not remember hearing anything. A few residents were actually worried that someone had been on their property without their knowledge and wanted to make sure everything was okay." I relaxed. "Oh, yeah, that is Silent Solutions. They are really quiet when they work." "That is what I figured," Tom said. "I have been seeing their work around the neighborhood. I just wanted to check with you and make sure there was not anything weird going on." Some of the older residents were genuinely concerned. "No, it is all legitimate," I assured him. "They are just very good at their jobs. Want me to send an email to the neighborhood listserv explaining?" "That would be great," Tom said. "Just something simple letting people know what is going on. I think once everyone understands, they will be fine with it." I drafted an email that afternoon, explaining about Silent Solutions and how they worked. I included David's contact information for anyone who was interested in hiring them. Within a few hours, I had a dozen responses thanking me for the explanation and asking questions about pricing and availability. By the end of the week, David told me he had gotten 15 new inquiries from Maple Ridge alone. The neighborhood was quickly becoming one of his biggest markets. The winter passed smoothly. Snow came and went, and every time I woke up to a clear driveway, I stopped thinking about it as something special and started thinking about it as just the way things were. That was the mark of a truly good service, when it faded into the background of your life, because it was so reliable. In February, I got an email from the local newspaper asking if they could interview me for a feature story about Silent Solutions. The reporter had heard about David's business and wanted to do a human interest piece about how it started and who was using it. She specifically wanted to talk to me about the HOA situation that had helped launch the company's growth. I agreed, and we did the interview over coffee at a shop in downtown Minneapolis. I told her the whole story, from Deborah's first complaint to the HOA investigation to the current peace and quiet in the neighborhood. The reporter was fascinated, especially by the detail about the crew dressing like ninjas. "This is such a Minnesota story," she said, laughing. "Someone creates a business out of spite to get around an HOA rule and it accidentally uncovers fraud. You cannot make this stuff up." The article came out 2 weeks later with the headline "Silent Ninjas and HOA Drama: How a Maple Ridge Dispute Created a Thriving Business." It was longer and more detailed than I expected, with quotes from me, David, Tom, and several other residents. There was even a sidebar about tips for dealing with difficult HOA boards. The response was huge. The article was shared thousands of times on social media. David's website crashed from the traffic. He had to hire an answering service to handle all the calls coming in. Within a month, he had opened a second location to serve the southern suburbs and was training new crew leaders. I became a minor local celebrity, at least in the weird world of HOA disputes and home service businesses. People recognized me at the grocery store and wanted to talk about their own HOA horror stories. A few even asked for advice, which I found funny since I was just a guy who had hired a snow removal service and gotten lucky through it all. Life in Maple Ridge remained peaceful. The new HOA board was functional and fair. My neighbors were friendly. My property was well maintained. It was everything I had wanted when I first bought the house, before Deborah and her noise complaints had turned it into a source of stress. As the second winter with Silent Solutions came to an end, and spring started to emerge, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in 2 years. I had gone from being a quiet guy who just wanted to be left alone to someone who had stood up to an abusive HOA president, helped expose a fraud scheme, and inadvertently helped launch a successful business. I did not regret any of it. Not the confrontation, not the legal fees, not even the stress and anxiety of those early months. It had all been worth it to live in a place where I could actually enjoy my home without fear of arbitrary fines and unreasonable complaints. One Saturday morning in early April, David stopped by with something that looked like a plaque wrapped in brown paper. "I wanted to give you this," he said, handing it to me, "as a thank you for everything." I unwrapped it to find a wooden plaque with an engraved metal plate. It read, "To Bryan Hoffman, our first residential client and the reason Silent Solutions exists, thank you for believing in us. David Chen and the Silent Solutions team." I was genuinely touched. "David, this is great, thank you." "No, thank you," he said seriously. "You took a chance on a weird idea, and you stuck with us even when things got complicated. You gave us credibility and helped us grow. I mean it when I say this business would not be where it is without you." We shook hands, and I hung the plaque in my home office where I could see it while I worked. It was a reminder of what could happen when you stood up for yourself, when you got creative instead of just accepting the status quo, and when you found the right people to work with. That summer, the HOA organized a neighborhood block party for the first time in years. It was Tom's idea, a way to build community and help everyone get to know each other better. I volunteered to help with the planning, figuring it was time I got more involved in the neighborhood beyond just fighting about snow removal. The party was scheduled for a Saturday in June. We closed off the main street through the neighborhood, set up tables and grills, hired a DJ, and invited everyone to come out. The weather cooperated with perfect sunny skies and temperatures in the 70s. Almost every house was represented. People brought dishes to share. Kids ran around playing games, and the DJ played a mix of music that somehow kept everyone happy. I worked the grill for a couple of hours, flipping burgers and hot dogs while chatting with neighbors I had only nodded to before. Grace came by with a plate of her famous chocolate chip cookies. "This is wonderful," she said, looking around at the crowd. "The neighborhood feels alive again. For a while there, with all the drama, it felt like everyone was just hiding in their houses trying to avoid trouble." "Things are definitely better now," I agreed. "And a lot of that is because of you," Grace said. "You stood up when the rest of us were too tired or too scared. You made a difference, Bryan." I did not know what to say to that, so I just smiled and offered her a burger. As the party continued into the evening and the DJ started playing slower songs, I found myself standing at the edge of the crowd, watching my neighbors dance and laugh and enjoy themselves. This was what a neighborhood should be. Not a place ruled by petty tyrants enforcing arbitrary rules, but a community of people who looked out for each other and tried to make life better for everyone. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Saw the pics from your block party on social media. Looks amazing. Glad you are having fun." "You earned it." I texted back a thank you and put my phone away. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The music was good, the food was good, and the company was good. Life was good. As I stood there, I thought about that morning almost 2 years ago when Deborah had knocked on my door to complain about snow removal noise. At the time, it had felt like the start of something terrible. In a way, it had been, but it had also been the start of something good. Change, growth, standing up for what was right. All because I refused to accept that unreasonable complaints and arbitrary fines were just the way things had to be. I grabbed another burger off the grill and joined the party, ready to enjoy the evening and the community I had helped create. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, whatever they might be. But tonight, I was exactly where I wanted to be, surrounded by good people in a neighborhood that finally felt like home. The block party became an annual tradition. Tom served another term as HOA president before passing the role to someone else, maintaining the culture of reasonable governance he had established. Silent Solutions continued to grow, eventually expanding to serve communities across the Twin Cities metro area and even franchising to other cold-weather cities. David credited our neighborhood as his proof of concept, the place where he learned what worked and what did not. As for me, I kept living in my house in Maple Ridge, kept going to work, kept being an active member of the community. I served on the HOA board for a term myself, making sure that the lessons we had learned from the Deborah era were not forgotten. I pushed for clear bylaws, transparent finances, and reasonable enforcement of rules. It was not exciting work, but it was important. Years later, when people asked me about that whole situation with the HOA and the silent snow removal service, I would tell them it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed the conflict or the stress, but because it taught me that you did not have to just accept unreasonable authority. You could fight back, intelligently and legally, and sometimes you could win. And sometimes when you fought back, you did not just solve your own problem. You solved problems for other people too. You created opportunities that would not have existed otherwise. You made things better, in small ways that rippled outward in directions you could never predict. All because someone complained about the sound of a shovel scraping snow at 6 in the morning, and I decided to do something about it. The story of the Silent Ninja Crew, as people had taken to calling them, became part of the neighborhood lore. New residents moving in would hear about it and ask if it was really true. The answer was always yes, it was true, every word of it. And if they wanted their snow cleared silently in the early morning hours, well, there was a service for that. Life had a funny way of working out sometimes.